Once again, very good evening, all. Thanks for everyone. So, last class we have been discussed till now. We have discussed lot of content about the core component of SQL Server, right? So today we are going to start with one of the very interesting that concept, that is installation. As a database administrator, we must and should know about how to install SQL Server, so that is the major requirement as a database administrator. So we can do the SQL server in two ways. So we can do the SQL server installation in two ways. One is graphical user interface and one is command line. One is graphical user interface and second one command prompt, command line. Okay. First, we will concentrate more on graphical user interface. Later, we will move on the command line. How to install the SQL server through command line. Okay. Now, SQL server is a software. You know about software, right? Like SQL is also one of the software where you can go on install on your machine. Like SQL Server is also one of the software where you can go and install on your machine. Now, before you can go and discuss all one by one, what is instance and what is the minimum requirement, and I'm not asking what is the free installation steps, and I'm asking what is the minimum requirement. I mean, if you want to install the SQL server on your machine, how to installing in your laptop? How you are installing in your laptop? And the same you can install in a real world as well. There is no difference. How to install SQL server in your laptop and desktop? Same how will install in real world as well, in a real environment as well. So now, what are the minimum requirements if you want to do install the SQL server operating system? I mean, which version? When you go for the version, either you are installing 32-bit operating system or 64-bit operating system, and then RAM is required, and version for either version you are installing 32-bit or operating system or 64-bit operating system, then RAM is required, and cores also important. Core means CPUs. How many cores of CPU? Then storage is required. So these are all the minimum requirement at the operating system level. So what kind of versions of operating system you are using in generic terms? So we are using Windows XP and Windows 7, Windows Vista, Windows 8.1, Windows 10, and Windows 11, right? But when you go to the real world, so what are the operating systems? Forget about Linux, and we are not about discussing Linux in this class today. And we have separate session. We are going to discuss lot about Windows platform. So we concentrate more on the Windows operating platform. Now, when you go to the real world, so what are the operating systems are Windows is having, and Windows Server 2000. And when you go for such Windows Server operating system versions list, and what are the operating systems are Windows Server 2000 and Windows Server 2003 and Windows Server 2003 R2, 2008, 2008 R2, 2012 and 2012 R2, and Windows Server 2016, Windows Server 2019, Windows Server 2022, and Windows Server 2025 also is available. So that is how you will get the servers, right? So in generic world, we are calling as a Windows 10 and Windows 11 and Windows 8 and Windows 8.1. When you go for the real world, there is no, sir. We are never install servers on Windows Server. Windows servers on Windows 10 and Windows 11, Windows 8, whatever you are using. So we'll install on Windows servers versions. Okay. And when you go here, see Windows Server 2000, Windows Server 2003, Windows Server 2003 R2, and Windows Server 8, Windows Server 8. Windows Server 2008 R2, Windows Server 2012, and Windows Server 2012 R2, Windows Server 2016, Windows Server 2019, Windows Server 2022, Windows Server 2025. So we'll get same, right? Like how we are seeing the Windows servers. Same our SQL versions also is available, and SQL Server 2005 and 2008 and 2012, 2014 and 2016, 2017 and 2019 and 2022. These are all our SQL Server versions. So like same you can also find versions on Windows servers and Microsoft Windows servers. On top of any one Windows servers, we are going to install SQL Server. So when you try to install SQL Server, you need to more concentrate on either your operating system is 32-bit or 64-bit. Okay, in olden days we know about 32-bit architecture, but we know about 64-bit architecture, and we have one more also, Itanium. So in SQL Server 2002 to 2000, we can install SQL Server on Itanium version. It is also like an operating system only, but Itanium also there will be 64-bit of operating system and 34-bit of operating system. Now no more we are using, just I'm passing the information. So 32-bit operating system and 64-bit operating system and Itanium operating system, you can install the SQL Server. But nowadays we never see all these three, and we will see only 64-bit operating system, and we will concentrate more on 64-bit operating system, and we will also compare with 32-bit operating system whenever we are discussing memories. Okay, whenever we are discussing memory concept, we will more discuss on what is 32-bit operating system and what is 64-bit operating system. Then you will become more stronger. I will show you how much RAM you require, how many cores you require, how much of disk you require. I'll show you, just hold on. Now next, what is the requirement, sir? When you go for SQL Server version and edition, and you are comfortable with operating system, right? When you comfortable with operating system, then you can, and you will go for the which version I need to install, and which SQL Server edition I need to install. If someone is asking, come to you and asking, can you please go and install SQL Server and so on instance, you will go and install SQL Server? No, right? You require some prerequisites. You require some standard things, right? Where we need to taken care before we can go and install SQL Server. Once your SQL Server is installed, later again it will be pay some challenges, right? Challenges again need to again you need to perform some changes. So you need to capture all the content whatever you require. Then you will go for the SQL Server installation. Minimum requirement, I'm telling. I'm not going for in detail. We'll go for details in while. So what is next minimum requirement? What is next minimum requirement? .NET framework, right? You require .NET framework, means whatever, not only our SQL Server. Again, I'm telling, not only our SQL Server, whatever the software you are installing on Windows, every software that is using .NET framework in the backend. .NET framework is nothing but graphics. So our SQL Server is also using the .NET framework to show our clear our graphical user interface. So minimum requirement is a .NET framework. See, when you go to the .NET also, when you go to .NET framework, and .NET is also Microsoft product, and when you go to the .NET framework on Windows, so when you scroll down, when you go to Wikipedia, and so once again see .NET framework, and also got .NET framework 1.0 and 1.1 and 1.1 SP1 and 2.0 and .NET framework 2.1, 2.2 and .NET framework 3.0, 3.1. See, all our supported versions will be there here. Now we are at 4.8, sir. Now we are standing on 4.8. So how our SQL server is keep on growing, and our .NET framework also keep on designing by Microsoft. How I designing Microsoft? How would SQL server keep on enhancing by Microsoft, right? So a lot of enhancement you are doing every version to version, right? Like same .NET framework is also keep on enhancing in backend by Microsoft .NET framework also keep on enhancing, like how it is SQL Server is enhancing. .NET framework is also enhancing by backend by Microsoft. Assume if I want to install SQL Server 2005, why I'm especially with the 2005 means, so completely Microsoft redesigned in the code in the SQL Server 2005. Microsoft came up with lot of components, okay, lot of redesign. When you go for graphical user interface, when you go for the graphical user interface with SQL Server 2005, okay, assume you want to install and you want to install SQL Server 2005, and as never install, we are no more install SQL Server 2005 in real world, okay, because it is already Microsoft has been stopped, and Microsoft completely supports also stop, and we never install, and we never get chance to install. But even though extended support also stopped, we are comparing the SQL Server 2005, and we are comparing with 2005, and where we are standing now, so that you will get more idea about SQL Server, and we'll compare with SQL Server 2005 and 2014, and then 2019. Okay, these three version we'll see, and graphical user interface changes made by the Microsoft. Then we'll get a better idea, sir. How we are how we are so assuming you want to install SQL Server 2005 on the year 2005. On the SQL Server we have .NET Framework 2.0. When you are installing 2005, on that time 2.0, if you want to install SQL Server 2005, you need minimum requirement is .NET Framework 2.0. I need to know whether my laptop is having 2.0 is available in my laptop or not. How can I verify? So if you want to verify, go to registries, regedit. It is shortcut for registries. So regedit is the registry key, sir. Please don't play on it. Please don't play on this one. It is completely Windows level, or everything will be available in the registries only. If you are stronger in registries only, you can open the registry just to validate, okay. And regedit is the shortcut for open the registries, and it contains lot of information about whatever the products, whatever the services which are running on your operating system. Everything you can get it from the registries. Even we can get it SQL Server versions also. Now how we are getting .NET framework, and same SQL Server also will get it. So once open regedit, okay, go to HKLM and go to Microsoft. Go to HKLM and go to software, and Microsoft. Here .NET framework is there, right? .NET framework. Now you can see .NET framework 2.0 and 3.0 and 4.0. So if you want to install SQL Server 2005, the minimum requirement is .NET framework, right? In my laptop, I'm having 2.0. Okay, we are good now. And what is the minimum requirement? What is next requirement? And what is the next requirement is Windows installer. You require a Windows installer also, and Windows flavors by default. Windows installer will be available in Windows servers. Not only our SQL server. Again, I'm telling, if you want to do install any software, okay, Windows platform by default it will be used in Windows installer. Okay. Now, if you, I need to verify whether my operating system is having Windows installed or not. How we'll get it? Windows installer means when you go to run command msi exec. Okay, msi exec is the shortcut, sir. When you open, I'm having Windows installer, that is which is running on 5.0 version. Even Windows installer is also having the version, sir. Not only .NET framework, even Microsoft is also keep on enhancing Microsoft Windows installer versions. Even Microsoft is also keep on enhancing the Windows installer, right? And 2.0, 3.0, and 3.1, 4.0. Now we are standing at Windows installer 5.0. Okay, these are our minimum requirement. If you want to install SQL Server any version, we are using latest version operating system, right? Now we are getting under latest .NET framework, latest Windows installer, and the latest operating system we are using, right? Okay, so all the latest product features, but and these are our minimum to minimum requirement. If you want to install SQL Server, okay, now let me show. My operating system is 64-bit operating system, sir. So when I can get my complete, so when I discuss SQL Server 2005, okay, and SQL Server Itanium, SQL Server 64-bit operating system, and SQL Server 32-bit operating system. But I'm not installing Itanium. I'm not installing in a 32-bit operating system, and my operating system is a 64-bit operating system. And how I can get my complete operating system information is, and go to run. If you want to check your operating system MS Info 32, when you search with MS Info 32, you will get a complete information about your operating system and hardware and software information. Mine is Windows Server Windows 11 Home Base Edition. The server name and what is the my model, everything here. Very important is very important is a processor which is running with Intel Core i5, which is running with Intel Core i5 processor with 10 crores and 12 logicals and one socket with 10 core and 12 logical processors, right? And when scroll down and how much memory is available in my laptop, 16 GB of memory is available. So when you will get complete information when you open MS Info 32, okay. So if you want to do see more information about your hardware, you can search with the MS Info 32. It will captures. So when you are working with the performance tuning, you need to see all these parameters. So you need to capture the server information as well. What is my hardware? So when you're trying to compare with production to development and development to test, and maybe your application team will come to you, like how they will come to you means, and development is working fine, but my production is having some issues. Whatever the data is available in production, same data is available in the dev as well, right? But dev is working very smoothly, and when you compare with production box, then you need to start comparing with both hardware and software and SQL server level, and then you will get a better idea. So for that purpose, you need to open my MS Info 32 to get more information about your software and hardwares. When I go to the SQL Server 64-bit operating system, so in SQL Server 2005, and only two folders available, and one is tools folder. So in SQL Server 2005, we have only two folders, right? Tools, under tools binary. When you go to SQL Server 2019, go to mount. See these many files, these many folders are available, right? So what kind of enhancement is done SQL Server 2005 to, and we have only two folders. All the data is keeping in the server folder. All over the data is keeping in the server folder. And Microsoft separated with the tools and So tools and Microsoft came up with a separate folder like SQL Server, Management Studio, SQL Server Data Tools, and SQL Server BI Tools. And so in SQL Server 2005, tools have been separated by Microsoft, our set of file. Also been separated by Microsoft in SQL Server, but Microsoft keep on version to version, and they make in single folder tools has been not been separated in SQL Server. That level we need to dig, and but I'm just comparing with you so that you will become somewhat stronger. Very rare case. Someone may ask you a very these questions, and what kind of folders will be available when I open set of file. This is rare questions actually. So as a database administrator, we can try to remember what is a registry, regedit is available, and what are the tools are available, resources are available, set of files is available. But each and every folder very difficult to recall, right, on your busy life, because version to version the folders structure will be changed, and the folder naming will be, and we can more folders, and less drives or more drives depend on your versions, and that is how Microsoft is maintaining. Okay, just for your comparison purpose, I'm just showing, and let me concentrate on SQL Server 2005. Then we will go for 2014, and then we will go for 2019. Okay, we'll do one by one, and how, and we'll do one by one. And 2005 will filed in my laptop. What is the minimum requirement if you want to install SQL Server 2005? Now we got it right. The hardware software requirement of 32-bit and 64-bit operating system, and SQL Server 2005 Enterprise Edition, and SQL Server 2005 Developer Edition, SQL Server 2005 Standard Edition. Mostly these are all three versions where will be seen mostly in your real world. Also one more Express Edition. This four will be used more out of this also. Standard Edition is the first, and next is the Developer Edition, next is Enterprise Edition, and next is Express Edition. And because cost license and cost you need to see the cost, basically you need to see cost. Basically if you someone is asking and which version you will use more in your environment, don't tell any Express Editions. Now don't tell any Express Editions. We are never use more Enterprise Editions because licensing cost is too high. We discuss the last class licensing part, right? It is approximately 10 lakhs. We need to pay for one license for enterprise edition. So that's the reason most of the servers will be used in standard edition only. Very less will be enterprise editions. Then even we have, and we can also use the express editions, and standard edition, and enterprise edition, and developer edition. If I compare, will become more stronger, will become more stronger. Why we are discussing all three means, you want to more stronger my agenda. This is nowadays we are directly opening, and click on next and next. SQL is done. I don't want to do that stuff. Let it be more become stronger in SQL Server. Okay, so when you go for SQL Server installation, what are the minimum requirements? So OS, operating system, and SQL Server version, and SQL Server edition, and .NET framework, and Windows installer. And when you go for SQL Server versions, which edition is very important. And when you go to the operating system also, see minimum require 512 MB of RAM. Minimum we require, if you having 512 of MB RAM, you are good at install SQL Server on your machine. And when you go for process, SQL Server process, when you go and search software hardware requirements, when you go for the processor, also minimum 1.4 gigahertz, right? For speed, if I'm having 1 gigahertz for speed, I'm good to install SQL Server to. When you go and search on the hardware and software requirements of SQL Server 2005, you can see minimum 12 MB of RAM is required. You need to you are good to install SQL Server on your machine. And when you go for process, also minimum 1.1 gigahertz per speed. Having 1 gigahertz speed, I am good to install SQL Server 2005. And mostly we are using and we are having two processors throughout the global. And most of the peoples are using one is Intel, and this is the topmost. And we one is AMD processor. And you will install either you are using AMD processor or you are using Intel core processor. So we are good to so we are using these two processor is sufficient, but we need also see speed of processor. If your speed of processor is 0.5, it is not compatible with the SQL Server 2005. SQL Server 2005 always make sure that you should be your processor should be 1 gigahertz per second. So that is the minimum required to install SQL Server. You have some kind of limitations when you go for standard and when you go for enterprises, and I'll explain after our installation. Okay, what is the limitations? And when you go for standard edition, in the minimum you can use 24 cores. You cannot behind 24 cores to SQL Server. If you have more like 250 GB of RAM and your desktop or laptop, you can use up to 125 GB of RAM. And you could use behind of 125 GB. Even if you have more RAM on your machines, that level of limitations is available. When you go to the standard edition, apart from everyone is and always, if you want to configure and always on availability group limitations only, basic AG you can configure, means one priority, one secondary, and only basic AG you can configure, means one primary, one secondary, that two from SQL Server 26 onwards. And the TDA cannot be enabled, sir. Transparent data encryption you cannot enable based on your application requirement. What is your requirement and what is your application requirement? We can also suggest them this feature. And if application team is coming to you and asking, we are require encryption, database level encryption, and your currently SQL is running on standard edition, you can straight away it's not compatible. We need to go for enterprise edition. Then they will upgrade the edition. Then they will enable the TDE. So based on your requirements, or you will suggest enterprise edition, and otherwise we are good at standard editions. Okay. So these are minimum requirements. In case they need enterprise edition, they will especially tell to use. In the case they need to enterprise edition, they will explicitly tell over the ticket itself, install enterprise edition. Otherwise we will go for the standard edition. We never ask application team every time. Okay, when you joining a new organization, and this is what you need to get the KT also. So when you got installation, and what are the best practices we need to follow? Either I need to contact application team, I need to blindly proceed. Whatever the application is requested as a standard edition, standard as for standards will follow the project to project. It's a different differs project to project. It differs. I'm not telling blindly go and install the SQL server, but please be careful, conscious, and whenever you are installing the SQL server, it's again if you want to change something, it's a bit challenging. And explicitly they will mention, sir, if you they wanted to different collation and they wanted to different kind of setup, they will tell you over the email or over the ticket as well directly. In case they are explicitly mentioned, then they will follow the standards. Otherwise we will go for the basic standard as well as a regular approach. When you project in your project, not our laptop, you can go for this. When you go to hardware and software and SQL server 2005 2000 2014, 2016, 17 hardware requirements. You'll get completely information and how much GB of RAM is required and how many what is the core and what is your processor speed. Now our processor speed should be must and should 1 gigahertz and higher and two good high speed. Okay, that is minimum requirement, and we will see what are the operating system is compatible. Now you are able to see SQL Server 2002, SQL Server 2020, and you are able to see Windows Server 2022. Even we also should learn lot of Windows Server and how what are the changes made the server level. If you want to do install SQL Server 2029, minimum your operating system should be Windows Server 2016. If you want to do install SQL Server 2019, minimum your operating system should be 2016. So if you want to 2016, if your operating system is below Windows Server 2016, you cannot install SQL Server 2019. And even Windows 8 also it is not compatible, and Windows 8.1 is also not compatible. Your operating system should be either Windows 10 or it should be Windows Server 2016 greater than. If you want to install SQL Server 2019, uh, now where we are standing and go to the SQL Server. So I told you right, we require .NET Framework 2.0 and we require .NET Framework and we require Windows installer, right? And there is a folder called regedit, and when you go to folder already having 2.0, no need to go and search in Google. Microsoft is also providing with the along with the software, and when you go to this folder and when you go to this folder and nobody and you are already having got 2.0, no need to go and search in Google to download the .NET framework. Microsoft is also providing with along with software. Microsoft is providing .NET framework 2.0. If your .NET framework 2.0 is not installed, okay, you can go and install. Let me. So there is called now we are good at we have .NET framework 2.0 as also, right. When we are checking registry, we have already in .NET framework 2.0, right. Now we are at good. And, let me go to the setup file 2005. This is my setup file. Run as administrator. Ignore. Please ignore it. Agree the license stamp and click on next. It is just validating the prerequisites. Then you can click approximately 13 checks, right? Again, I'm telling whatever the checks Microsoft has been done, whatever the checks Microsoft has been done out of 13, all 13 has been successful except one warning. You can ignore warnings, no need to work. You can proceed the installation. You can proceed the installation, okay, but fail means you no need to stop. Don't install SQL Server. And when you got system configuration failures, and when you got failures, and you need to start troubleshooting. If warnings you can ignore, and you can ignore, and one is the ASP.NET framework is failure is happen, and my operating system is success. And names, I told you right, license part, you know about core based license, you know about server plus cal based license, right. Assume you're working one organization, and for let me take IBM, and IBM organization, the IBM is used, right, one of the the topmost companies throughout the global IBM. Okay, now IBM purchase 200 licenses. How I can guarantee and you are not using more than 200 SQL instance, and you purchase 200 licenses from Microsoft. How can I guarantee that you are using 200 instances on your servers? How can I guarantee that this is and Microsoft will do, and right, whenever your purchase license, Microsoft will provide unique number, and that is 16 digit code. Microsoft will provide the 16 digit codes, your volume based license, VLC volume based license. So Microsoft provide 16 digits code for you. And also what Microsoft will do, right? Microsoft will provide the contract for any other company. For example, Deloitte. Okay. Microsoft will provide the contact for Deloitte. Now Deloitte will go whenever anytime. Even the government also they will be CBI, right? So directly they will get and they will go and they can open these servers are taken and see how many servers you are using for you, and that is how Microsoft is doing. And they are going to provide to third party companies. You are not guarantee whether you are using only. So Microsoft is provide sub contact to anyone. They will go and they will go to the company and they will start investigate. Really, we're using 200 licenses for, and you're using more than license based on the license scheme. That is how, sir. Okay. You may also get definitely how we can rely on the company, and we are using only this many licenses whatever we purchase from Microsoft. This is how Microsoft going to track. Now provide any name, sir. SQL name, any name we can provide. SQL you can provide SQL 2005, and company name, any name you can any name you can type. And features, I'm going to select named instance 2005 SQL Server space 2005 naming. I'm going to mixed mode, and SA password also need to provide. And you go to services.msc, and in Google also you can search what is instance. Let me